Last time on the Wizardcast.
I'm so bored.
Well,
Bored.
I could tell you the story about the first time I wore the hat.
Nah, I've heard already. Like 42 times.
Okay. How about the time I dressed up like a Jedi and had a lightsaber fight on stage at Dreamforce?
I was there for that, Brian. I was the person you were fighting, remember?
That's right. How about the time I was walking up to my Dreamforce session and I nearly tripped on the stairs?
Okay, there's a potential for you suffering. Yeah, sure, let's hear it.
Okay. So, there I was, walking up the stairs to my Dreamforce session when I nearly tripped. I quite nearly fell down and hurt myself. It was most amusing.
And?
And what?
That's it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was great.
It's just missing something. It's not as much drama. Oh, okay. I got it. Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Can you move a little? Just right.
What?
Just right over here. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Right there.
Now what? Oh, not the head. Oh, my head again. Oh, my nose. Oh.
Now it's interesting.
I think my glasses got shoved into my eyeball.
And now the conclusion of the Wizardcast.
I'm Brian Kwong.
And I'm Mark Ross.
We're Salesforce experts that love talking about technology and Salesforce.
We also love humor. Doesn't mean we're actually good at it.
In the Salesforce community, I'm known as the Salesforce Wizard, likely due to me wearing a wizard hat at Salesforce events.
And I'm known as Salesforce Yoda for pretty much the same reason.
You should see the ears.
We have a passion to help educate and entertain people.
So we've joined forces to create Wizardcast.
We've got tips and best practices.
We talk with interesting people.
All mixed with quote-unquote jokes and humor.
Welcome
to the
Wizardcast. Thank you for calling the Psychic Hotline. What future do you want to know about?
Brian, one, we're doing a podcast, and two, if you're psychic, shouldn't you have known I was going to push you down the stairs earlier?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, sorry, I'm filling in for a friend. He got hit by a car. Never saw it coming.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you could please save Brian's remaining sanity, whatever is left, you can send us a joke by tweeting at wizardcast_pod or emailing wizardcast@wizardnews.com, because he's going to keep looking at these terrible things, and I'm quite honestly quite worried that his mind will just fracture and splinter into nothingness.
Hey, I'm proud of myself. I came up with that joke on my own.
Oh, it may be too late already, folks. Please do what you can.
Libsyn. It gives my skin the moisturizer it needs to be healthy and shiny.
What? Yep. Nope. He's gone. Libsyn is not a moisturizer, Brian. It is a place to host your podcast files,
which you can get a free month of with the promo code PODMAGIC.
Yeah, I gotta stop walking into these promotions.
Mark, we're joined today by a very special guest who's going to not talk to us about one, but two topics.
Two topics in one.
See, people, you should be paying for us, because now you're not getting just one topic for free, you're getting two.
It's efficiency, right? It's a service. Efficient podcast as a service. We'll call it ePass.
ePass. Actually, I
Yes.
think that's what it is down for, like, paying tolls in Illinois. So that's probably already trademarked.
That's the ePass? Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Probably have to come up with something different. But anyways, we're joined today by the CEO and founder of elements.cloud. He's going to talk to us about business analysis principles and this mysterious thing called GDPR. So everyone...
Ooh, initials. It can't be good.
No. Is that initials or is that an acronym?
It's both. Initials are an acronym. That's the definition of an acronym, is a series of initials. Can we actually introduce our guest now?
Sure. Hi, Ian.
Okay.
Oh, hi there.
It's Ian Gotts.
Hi. So thank you for inviting me to come and talk about acronyms and acronyms, actually. Yeah. So BA and GDPR. So part of this, I guess, is I spent probably 20 years doing business analysis, running workshops, running software companies that do business analysis. And then the other acronym, GDPR, is the General Data Protection Regulation. That's this new EU standard that's affecting everyone around the world if they've got EU data. So what do you want to talk about?
Might have EU data.
Might have EU data. Although I'm not sure if you saw, Mark Benioff was on CBS Morning Today a couple of days ago, 3-4 days ago, and he was saying we should have GDPR or a US version of GDPR. So American can run, but it can't hide. It's going to get us all eventually.
Right. And of course, if America did GDPR, it wouldn't be called something like GDPR because we have to have our like acts, like name into actual words. We can't have something nice. It'll be probably called something like the Privacy, Freedom, and Justice Acts, or
they'll figure out a way to call it like HERPA or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, let's start with business analysis or BA. I guess I love this topic because I think it's integral for any good Salesforce administrator to have as a foundation. But before you start talking principles, how about you tell us what the heck is business analysis?
Okay, so I think business analysis is everything from, I wrote it down on a piece of paper through to I'm asking you questions and I think I've got the answers. So it's one of those horrible generic business. I've analyzed the business. That's what business analysis is.
And that's the end of the podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, that's value for money. It's also really efficient. We had it done in like 2 minutes. But the scariest word that a Salesforce admin can hear is the word just. I mean, boss walks past and goes, could you just implement Einstein? Could you just add a pick list? Could you just add a new object? And the scarier answer after that is yes. Yeah. Yes, I can do that. So business analysis is actually the polite way of saying no, or saying, let me understand whether we've already done it. So that's why a Salesforce admin needs it. That's what protects you from just building stuff and not realizing that it doesn't hang together, or when you've built it, the person who was asking for it didn't really understand what they wanted. You need to be good at asking questions and understanding what the user really wants, and that's what the business analysis is. It's a way of asking questions, and then the most important thing is a way of writing it down so that both you and the person who are having that discussion understand what it is. Because the problem is, if I say, oh, well, what you mean is this and this and this and this, and you walk away going, yeah, I think that's what I meant, and then I walk away with a very different picture, then I build what I thought you said, and then you come back and go, no, Ian, that's not what I wanted. So business analysis is about, first of all, asking those questions to make sure that you have an understanding about what the user wants, and secondly, getting them bought into it so they understand and confirm exactly what they want before you start building anything in Salesforce.
So it sounds like to me you're almost saying it's almost like being the therapist for the business that ends up writing the care plan after the session's done.
Yes, but not after the session is done, while the session is happening. What you want to do is write it down so the person who's looking at it goes, no, that's not what I meant. Oh, yeah, but you said that. Oh, yeah, but when I said qualified lead, I didn't mean just a lead added to Salesforce. I meant a lead which actually has all these qualification criteria, therefore they're just about to buy. Oh, I didn't realize you meant that. That's the discussion you need to have. And if you write it down in a flow chart or a process mapping type style and use a nice simple style, then that's the way you make sure that you get clarity between you and your business users. So it might be one-to-one, or maybe it might be you and a workshop of 10 people.
Okay, so when you say writing it down, you're not talking about like me with my little notepad keeping my own notes. You're talking about having it someplace where everyone's able to visualize and see it and be able to comment upon it, collaborate on it, make corrections, and so forth. Absolutely. So that means it's a shared collaborative way of doing it. Now, I don't care whether you're doing it on a whiteboard and everyone's agreeing to it, or it's using an application like Elements, which is a visual process mapping tool. What I really care about is making sure that people understand the principles of doing it, and a very simple approach, which is line coming in, which is a trigger. What is it? An input. An activity, which has got a verb on it, and an output, and a line coming out with text on it. And then some way of saying who does this. Now,
I see lots of people drawing processes and they just have boxes and they go, like, that's sales, that's marketing, that's qualification. No, what I said was I want that activity in the box has to have a verb. Process order, qualify lead, input details. And I want a line with some text on it. Because what the discussion is always, well, what is that trigger? When they say it's a lead, okay, now I need to get my business analysis skills, which is my questioning skills. So what is a lead? Oh, qualified. Fantastic. What does qualified mean? So think about your 3-year-old daughter who keeps on going, why? It's that level of questioning. So what do you mean? Why is that a qualified lead? Oh, because it's got those criteria. So why have they got those criteria? Oh, hang on, the process before that needs to do an activity, which is qualification. Right, now we're getting more clarity. So it's digging down into those more whys and those more whys and those whys. So a couple of short stories. I was talking about this at JVS, which is a non-profit in San Francisco, fantastic group. They train up admins. So if in the San Francisco Bay Area, they have cohorts of students coming through for free, and they'll train them up to get Admin 201. And they got 3 or 4 of us to sit down and do a sort of a business analysis panel session. And I couldn't control myself. I got a pen and I had to draw this sort of picture up on the wall, and because we're trying to describe things. And as the panelists, we were saying, okay, let's just map this thing out on the wall. And then I said, okay, we've now got it mapped on the wall. But I said, look, let's wipe out the text on the lines. See how how much information we've lost there. And we went back and I said, okay, so let's try and put it back how it was, because it just feels uncomfortable having a process diagram on a wall without text on the lines. I've been doing it so long. And I put some text up there, and someone else on the panel went, no, that's not what we agreed. I said, well, what did we agree? And no one could remember. It's like, okay. So we were only doing it 5 minutes ago and we can't remember what's on there. So you walk away from a session where you haven't really got down into that detail. Nobody can really remember. Mm-hmm. So that's story number 1. Story number 2 is just, I was sitting with a client, again, happens to be another non-profit, and they launch churches. So they actually
into space or
no, they create new churches around the world.
A lot of fuel.
It could be a really small church. Maybe it's a congregation of mice.
There we go. But even to launch really small churches with very small mice, you still need money. And their accounting process, they had 43 different accounting processes because of the different ways they grew up over time and the different ways they worked with people. They were doing the same thing, but they basically said, we don't have a standard way of working, so we'll work however the company wants to, provide the donations will work however they want to work. And they said, this is ridiculous, let's just get one. So they did a 4-hour session, online mapping. So they happened to use Elements for that. So they had they were mapping it in our application. Everyone could view it. And they had a panel of people who were all involved. And it took them 4 hours online. And they mapped out and they consolidated 43 different processes, different accounting processes down to one.
Nice.
The benefit is they've saved one person per week. 40 hours per week of savings came out of that one workshop, ongoing. Now, did they change Salesforce? They didn't have to because it was an accounting process. So this isn't just associated with fixing Salesforce. It could be anything.
Right. One of the hardest lessons that I think I had to learn in 10 years of being in the professional Salesforce world and just in general is no matter how much you know, no matter how much of an expert you are in something, you have to start with the assumption that you know nothing. And that can be really, really difficult. For the example you said, it's a qualified lead. But that means different things to different people. And if you make the immediate assumption of, you know what that is, you're just going to be wrong. I'm sorry. You have to go, well, what does it mean to you?
And the fact of the matter is that so many of our users that ask for things, they assume they know everything.
And they assume we may know what they already refer to.
Exactly. And I don't say that to be disparaging. It's just, they're coming in talking a very specific talk. And they also, maybe they know a lot about Salesforce, at least they think they do, because they've been maybe a sales manager working in it for 5, 10 years, whatever. And so they'll come up and ask, hey, Ian, I need you to make me a field. It's just a little drop down. I need you to make me a territory field. It shouldn't take too long, right? And then what is your immediate response to that, Ian?
Well, if I was really junior, I'd go, oh yeah, I can do that. Especially
Yeah,
from a new
but-
admin. If you're an experienced admin, you
you-
go, I'm not sure okay, let me just understand how that's going to get used to make sure that we don't already have that field. Why do we end up with objects with 382 fields? It's because the previous person went and created a field before you came in, and you go, oh, I can add that field for you, and suddenly I've got 7 fields called status and 6 fields called territory. Well, hang on, I thought territory management was a standard function inside Salesforce, so why do you want me to build another one? So all of those questions there, because that was a trick question, I caught that one. So
yeah, no, you got it.
That's assuming what you actually need was territory management in Salesforce. It may not be.
Right, exactly.
Because what they mean for
Exactly.
territory may be simply, hey, I just need to say this is zone A, B, or C.
And
Sure.
maybe those zones need to be custom object records because there's more involved.
Or maybe it's a multi-choice list, because maybe you could have one record that's in 2 different zones because it's a global entity.
No, that never happens. No.
Yes, because
No.
Steve Mullis gets sad about the baby seals.
Think-
Yes, I
think of the
understand.
baby seals.
that little debate we had about territory management that's happening. Conversations like that should be happening
Should be.
every time someone comes up and says, can you do this? So let's take you a step earlier than the business analysis. It starts with capturing requirements. So part of Elements is Excel on steroids. It's a dumping ground for requirements. And there are 3 things you need to do requirements. One is capture them centrally. So you want users to input requirements. And requirements are everything from could you add that pick list item to could you implement Einstein? And also some of those suggestions just are nonsense. They thought they wanted it. They've no idea why. They came back because they thought it was neat. So
It needs to be green.
Yes. So the second thing is you need to triage. You need to work out those which are genuine requirements. So get them in one place, triage them, and then the third thing is prioritize them.
Now, what's the difference between a triage and prioritize?
Triage says that some of these are too high level and I've no idea what to do with them, and therefore send them back for more information. Or work out, okay, this is immediate, we've got to do it. Then once you've understood them all, then you can start to prioritize them. So here's a bit of a clue. Phase 3 is what is the important word, because phase 3 is never going to get done. But you say to users, that's fantastic, but we'll put that in phase 3. They feel like they're getting
I love it.
because phase 1 and 2 are the one. Like you're going to get phase 1 done. Phase 2 is going to be whatever rolls out of phase 1. Phase 3 you're never going to get to because there's always new things coming in. But again, you've got it centrally in one central place. The users can look at it. We can see. You can send it back for more information. So there's this way of tracking and managing requirements is the beginning of business analysis. And the things I talk to Salesforce admins about is if you don't get the requirements bit right, the requirements will manage you. You will be constantly being chased by end users going, oh, could you just? Get them in the requirements, then you can start doing the analysis we just talked about. Then you can start building. And as admins, new admins, certainly, we love building stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And we need to
Because it's so
resist
fast.
We get a bit excited when new stuff comes in, right?
that. I can build that. I can definitely build that.
Yeah.
And the trick actually as an admin, if you actually want to have a life which doesn't get out of control, is actually to not build stuff. Is to try and simplify things all the time. So a little phrase I've got is that the only place automate comes before simplification is in the dictionary.
I like it.
So simplify first, understand what you're trying to do, work out a better way of doing it, work with your users to understand how you could do it a better way, simplify it down, get those 5 different variants into one, then you can go and automate, then you can go and build stuff in Salesforce. And then the last bit about business analysis, document it. You've got to write down what you changed, because I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday, let alone what I configured like 6 weeks ago. So again, if you don't write it down, then you're never ever going to work out when you come back to it 6 months later why you built it. What are the requirements around that process builder? Why do we add that object? What's that extra field do? So whilst it's fresh in your mind, there's a quick way, get it documented there and then.
And if nothing else, the description field on your custom fields is like a perfect place for that. You can do the route where you're actually like putting it into maybe, a group document that's in Quip or SharePoint or wherever, Google Docs. You could do that if you want, but if that's not feasible, the idea of, I made a custom field, this is why I created it, and putting that in the description is also incredibly valuable to any admin who comes and looks to it later.
Yeah.
Sure.
I always look at it from a reverse BA standpoint for the description field. I always want to say, what is it for? Who is using it? Who's putting the data in? Who's maintaining it? And then I usually, if I need to, link to some other resource where maybe the full documentation is located at.
Yeah, so we have this approach which is three words. The first one is how. How does it work? So if you've documented that process somehow, that's the first bit of documentation. So why are we using this custom field? Actually, it's in the context of this process diagram we've just drawn. So as I said, Elements is the free process mapping tool. So there's no excuse for not using something like that. The second thing is, so the first word is how. Second word is what. What did I customize? So let's connect those two. And the third thing is where. Where's the documentation? Could I link some documentation? So there's a specification we created. There's a web page. There's a help page. Again, the minimum is there's some descriptive text.
Right.
So one of the things we built, which is not part of free, it's part of our pro feature, is we pull all the configuration data out of Salesforce. So Apex triggers, classes, objects, always down to field level, and we dump it in a place where you can start to add documentation. And we do stuff like, tell you where a field is used. So this field is used in these email templates, in this process builder workflow, on that page layout. So we're trying to give the tools to the admins so that if they do have it dumped in their lap from the previous person, or they've just inherited an org from a new they've come into a new job, they stand some chance of understanding what's been built. So that's paid, but you can have a play with it. There's a 14-day trial. So my little tip would be, if you're just a new consultant going into a customer, or a new admin joining a client, go and use the free trial, the 14-day trial, and just do one synchronization. It'll take you about 15-20 minutes. Set it up and run the sync, and then you'll see what you're walking into, and you may choose to walk away when you see the results.
That would be true for some of my past jobs. All right, so we're going to get to kind of like talking GDPR in a second, but one thing that always comes up repeatedly when I talk about business analysis and collecting requirements, all that fun stuff, is people saying, well, my boss, my manager, they're not bought in to why you should do it. We got Salesforce because Salesforce is fast. So they just want us to build stuff fast. How am I supposed to convince someone who, is basically paying my salary or to take the time to do the principles in business analysis and do it right the first time?
Okay, that's a really good question. I think the first thing is everyone's got this view of, okay, we've got to document what we do, we've got to draw process maps, and it's going to take hours and hours or weeks and weeks. And they remember the old business re-engineering exercises from years ago. I think if you can get to the stage where, as a Salesforce admin, you can don't bother about tools, get a piece of paper and sketch it out and go, so let me just understand, is this really what you want? So in the conversation that you're having with your boss, you said, can you just do that? That conversation, I just need to be clear about exactly what we need. And you start using the principles of, here's a box, so we're doing that, then what the trigger, okay. Just the act of that, doing it in front of them, the person will start to go, oh yeah, okay, now I understand the miscommunication, now I can help you. So don't turn it into, oh, by the way, I've got a 3-day exercise to do mapping. No, this is an integral part of the way we have the conversations with users about what they want. Now, there is the question which is, well, that's pretty scary and I've never done that before and I'm going to feel embarrassed. Okay, this stuff's like a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get at it. I've done like 20 years of running these workshops, and the interesting horror stories of the things that you discover when you're mapping up, we haven't got time for. Oh, no, I'll tell one short story. I was mapping at top level for an entire organization. So we had the whole board in the room, and we were mapping out the top level of how their company worked because they really wanted to do some transformation. It was clear by lunchtime that there were 2 people in the room who had identical job descriptions, but they had different titles. and they had entire teams doing exactly the same thing. They never knew because they'd never have a conversation. It was only when we got them all in the room, we started, one was called business development and one was sales development. And they always assumed they'd done different things. And it was really clear they were doing exactly the same thing. And I went to the CEO at lunchtime and went, what do you want to do here? And he went, just let's play it out. I.e., you're the stranger with the briefcase, you're the consultant, if I'll throw you under the bus.
Uh-huh.
So that was fine. But about 2 weeks later, one of them resigned and they took the whole team out. So there were some, that's one horror story. But there are examples where you find huge savings just in, why do I do that? Well, we don't need to do that anymore. So let's just stop sending that report, or let's stop doing this. So if you can find a few examples of those, that drives some savings before you even start coding Salesforce. Okay, so about that using that muscle, don't do it in high-risk situations in front of your boss. Let's find the other situations where we can practice. So you're supporting a non-profit and they do a cake bake sale. Well, that's a repeatable process. Let's practice on that. Practice at school. Practice at your kid's school. Where can you find examples where you can start practicing some of this process mapping outside the workplace? So then you're a little bit more confident in doing it. So at the end of the podcast, we'll hopefully we'll give you a link to an ebook where we've written down how you do business analysis, which is a free download off our site, talking about the techniques of doing this business analysis. Go and practice that outside the workplace so you become more confident in the principles. And then suddenly it's easier to do it in front of your boss. And then suddenly they are not saying, hang on, this is a waste of time. They immediately see the value if you're doing it with them.
Yeah. I like the idea of doing this outside of the workplace, because when you get right down to it, everything we do in life is a process of some sort. We just don't think about it that way. And you don't even have to have someone else to be asking the question. You can think of something that you do every single day, and you can ask yourself those questions, give yourself the answers, and do your documentation as practice.
Absolutely.
God forbid if we ever try to do a process documentation how we do this podcast, Mark.
There's no process.
I just got done saying that everything in life is a process.
No, we are the exception. This is a nexus of chaos, a locus point where nothing operates as it should, and reality bends and shapes to the whims of nothing.
Yes, but in aggregate, there's always order to the chaos.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Remind me to show you the funky thing with all the beads and the pegs creating the nice bell curve. I'll put the link in the show notes. We'll be putting the link to the ebook in the show notes too.
Perfect.
I don't want to hear any more about your beaded curtains. You can have a hippie place all you want, in your room or your office, but
it gives you a lot more privacy than you would think, Mark.
Okay.
So all right. So let's go back to work, because there's this big sword of Damocles hanging over lots of our heads out there called GDPR. And
a lot of us don't realize it's there.
And I think most of us don't, because as a person who, I have my personal website, thewizardnews.com, which some of you might actually be on right now as you listen to this. Even as a little website, technically speaking, I could have implications when it comes to GDPR, potentially, because I know there's people in Europe that listen to this podcast.
So let me run a scenario by you, Ian, here real quick. Let's say you've got a business, and the business has a Salesforce, and maybe you've got about 50 users, maybe less than that. It's pretty small, and all of your clients are, let's say, schools in the United States. It's higher learning, higher education, maybe some corporate training. Is that site at risk?
No.
From GDPR?
No. Okay. GDPR is a set of. Clearly some legislation with some huge fines for people and it currently covers people who are storing EU resident data. So that scenario you said, no, they're not at risk at all. Roll the clock forward through 2 years, and GDPR equivalent style legislation will be in the US.
Well, let me ask you
at that point
a question here. And how do you know that you're not at risk? Because technically GDPR applies to EU residents even if they're not currently in the EU. So if you have
EU citizens.
Yeah, if you have someone who's an EU citizen who happens to be working for the United States school system, and you have their email address because they're part of your marketing scheme or whatever the case, aren't you impacted by GDPR then?
Oh, yeah, I guess technically, yes. I think with all of these things, legislation, you can choose to comply with it or not. Okay, so it's like speed limits. Okay, speed limit is 65 here. You can choose to drive at 65, or you can drive at 80, and you understand what the risks associated with it are. You drive in the crowded area, in built-up areas around schools, and it's 25, and you sort of go, I understand why it's 25. So me driving at 50 is just reckless. So I'd probably drive at 35. If it was a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit on the interstate, you go, well, that's ridiculous. That just doesn't make sense in terms of legislation. I'm going to drive at 70. Got to say. So we all make decisions which are sort of risk-based, and we actually make judgments about whether that legislation really makes sense to us. So that's the first thing. Everyone's getting exercised about, well, 25th of May is the deadline. 4% of global revenue is the fine. So the first thing is that. People have said to me, I can't wait for the 25th of May because then it will all be over and we can stop worrying about it.
Now that's when the fines start coming.
Well, but the point about this, it's not a crash diet. It's a lifestyle change. GDPR, at the heart of GDPR is something called privacy by design. And it's saying we want to flip from you spamming the hell out of people until they say no and turn it round to we can only contact people if they have some form of consent. Okay, so it's saying we should only be emailing, contacting customers, and consent is very broad. It could be we have a contract with them. It could be we're in a sales cycle, so it's called a lawful basis. It could be they've signed up for your blog, and therefore you've got permission. The fact that I've gone and bought an email list or I've scraped it off the internet and I just start sending people, that's what they're trying to protect people against. And as consumers, we all think that's a great idea. Now, marketing people groan and go, but I've been collecting that email list for the last 10 years. I don't want to delete any of them. And the answer is, no, you should be celebrating getting rid of the people who are in there, who the email's dead. They're never going to talk to you. You just waste cycles doing them. Someone rather
all you do is
unfairly,
annoy them.
yeah, and you're getting bounce backs, and it's just slowing down your database. Every search is taking longer. Every mailing costs you more. Someone said to me, if you've got AOL emails, just delete those. Any Hotmail, get rid of those as well. Just clear those out. But okay, so different story. Ferrari created a car called LaFerrari. Price tag was €1 million. Okay, and they only built 499. Okay, right. So limited market. The entry qualification to buy that Ferrari was you had to have 5 Ferraris currently in your collection. Okay,
Ferrari elitism. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. But I only want 499 customers. I don't want speculators buying them and selling them on. I want true collectors.
Got it.
So why am I telling this story? Part of it is, as marketers, we want to get really fine-tuned in terms of what's the perfect customer. Ferrari said, we want 499 customers who've got $1 million, €1 million, and they've got at least 5 Ferraris. So our qualification criteria has really got us focused. At the opposite end of the spectrum, I've got someone who's got 20 million emails on a database, of whom they've no idea how many of those are valid. What we want to be doing is getting closer to the Ferrari end, which means as marketers, we need to start thinking about, okay, what does the perfect customer look like? And how do we engage with them better? I'd far rather engage with 20,000 customers than spam 20 million. So that's the sort of thinking we need to get into the way we consider GDPR and marketing. But we also need to change the metrics. So if I'm a marketer and I'm measured by the number of emails on my database, I'm going to hire booth babes to collect as many names as possible at a show, which has got to be the wrong answer. It's been the wrong answer forever, but now there's a legislative reason why it's the wrong answer as well. So we need to change those metrics, which changes the behavior. And then that means we need to, back to business analysis, our process is going to change. The way we go to events, what we're trying to do at events, the way we capture those leads, the way we then communicate with them, the way we validate those consents, they are processes which are probably never written down because marketing never writes anything down around process. Now they're being held to account and go, right, now you need to, this is a chance to use that big 4% fine as an excuse to go and say, we need to run a project to understand how our business should operate in this new world.
There goes that plausible deniability they've enjoyed for so long.
Yeah, correct.
Or they could be like me, just not have any income.
Okay, but that's a great point, which is, yeah, but they'll never catch me. I'm a small company. The 4% fine doesn't mean anything. I think that's looking at the wrong end of this. Those companies who actually get their act together and say, okay, forget about the fine. The fine is great because it gives you a chance to get senior executive buy-in because they're focused on this. Use that as a catalyst to do the things you ought to be doing, which is now saying, how do we simplify and improve the way that we engage our customers? So improve our marketing activities. So we've actually gone and built a lot of the marketing-based processes. We're freely available. We looked at the legislation and said, how will this change? And we wrote down, how to run an event, how to qualify leads. And then there are some very specific things that GDPR wants you to do, such as this idea of the right to be forgotten. So everyone's worried about this right to be forgotten because everyone wants to. They'll all email and want to be. They'll want their data deleted.
What is the right to be forgotten, Ian?
There's articles 15 to 19 are the 6 different GDPR clauses which are associated with things that the rights of the subject. One is you can say, I want all my data deleted. And that should be in archives and backups and in production. One of the other clauses says that I should be able to ask where my data is stored. And you should be able to produce me a report, all of these within 30 days to tell me everywhere my data is held. And everyone is fixated on these things. And they're going, oh, it's going to be so hard and we're going to spend all our time worrying about that. How many people are genuinely going to come back and say, delete my data? Let's contrast that with another area of GDPR, which is about consents. This idea that I need to have permission before I contact people. Now that applies to every single customer on my database, and that's where the competitive advantage is. If I get that right, I start to have a proper engaged conversation with customers, and I'm not spamming them. That's competitive advantage versus my competition, because I'm actually dealing with your customer data properly. So think about Cambridge Analytica.
I'd rather not.
So 3 months ago, if you'd asked people what Cambridge Analytica was, they would have told you it was a font. Okay?
I thought they analyzed Cambridge.
Absolutely. But now they've raised everybody's awareness about how data is being misused.
Mm-hmm.
So now consumers are a lot more tweaked about it. So suddenly they're saying, should I go with this provider versus that provider? How are you going to look after my data? And if they go, well, actually, we're adhering to the principles of GDPR, and this is the consent we're getting, and this is a preference page where you can set up what we do and don't subscribe to, versus the competition who just spam you, that's competitive advantage. So I think there are reasons for doing this that are not driven by GDPR. Even if you're under the radar, no one's ever going to catch you. Doing this is actually starting to move your business into a more effective marketing machine, and you're building up that level of trust. And that's why Mark Benioff, I'm sure, is talking about needing a US version of GDPR. Salesforce is all about trust. He cares passionately about that, and he's trying to encourage other businesses to drive to the same level of trust as Salesforce has.
So I know you're saying, that Mark's all into it. Obviously, we are in Salesforce as people who listen to this podcast or on the podcast. But how do we know that this is something that is going to happen? You said, this is something that's going to happen in 2 years in the U.S. And yes, we have the Cambridge Analytica, but there is bound to be other factors. How do we know this is going to happen?
Yeah, I don't think it matters. Okay, so I think that doing some of the things that GDPR is encouraging us to do is just good marketing best practice. So making sure that you are having proper engagement and consent before you start emailing people, making sure that you're getting rid of all those dead leads, making sure that when you go to a show, you're collecting and having proper qualified conversations with people on the stand, not just scanning everybody with a pulse. And therefore you're passing to your sales guys people who genuinely want to have a conversation with you. These are all good things to do. GDPR is just forcing people to do it. I think even if GDPR doesn't come in, these are the things which we as marketers should be thinking about. So it's not avoiding the fine thing. It's about those companies who go, do you know what? Now is the chance for us to start to get our act together or clean up our act around what we do with marketing data, how the sales guys communicate with people. There are benefits there which are nothing to do with GDPR, nothing to do with avoiding fines. Now, you can choose not to do it, and you'll be less efficient. Now, if you are a big company, then obviously GDPR is a factor. If you're a company and your customers are huge companies and they are GDPR compliant, they typically will turn around to you and say, well, if we're GDPR compliant, you need to be too. So there's a trickle-down effect here for some companies. So I'm not talking to people about you've got to do this, and the fear of GDPR. I'm saying look at what the standards are trying to encourage you to do, and then put the right things in place. So last point in this, if you're on Salesforce and you genuinely do have to comply to the letter of the law for GDPR, then there's a bunch of custom objects you're going to have to build to go and manage all those consents. A simple checkbox on a contact or a lead isn't enough. GDPR says that you have to have a permission. When you capture that permission, it needs to be explicit. You need evidence of it. It needs a date. It needs to have an expiry date based on your company's marketing policies. So you need to track every single permission as a separate record. And we all thought the individual object was going to provide it. We opened the box for Spring 18 and took a look at the individual object and went, hang on, that doesn't do it. So we went back to the privacy teams inside Salesforce and went, are we missing something here? And they went, no, not really. We're planning to do that in the future. And I went, yeah, but GDPR isn't that far in the future. So about 6 weeks ago, we built a managed package to actually provide the custom objects and the stuff that you need to do to track consent properly, with all the Apex for tracking expiries and doing all that sort of stuff. We'll put a link in the show notes to, I wrote a document which essentially is the specification for what you have to go and build. So we'll stick that in the show notes as well. So if you read that document, you can either build it yourself, I think it's 7 custom objects and an Apex, or you can take a look at our app and see whether that works for you. Again, fairly relaxed.
And I know in Summer 18, which is coming out in a few weeks in June, so after the May 25th deadline, I believe they're making the individual more like a class 1 object, so you'd be able to create create some custom fields and things like that. So you might be able to add some of it. No? If you want to be fully GDPR compliant, you need to have a separate record which is a data permission record. Because so let's take the example. You hit my website, you download an ebook, that's a permission record. You've signed up as a customer, that's another permission record. Those are expiring. You now come to an event, I scan you at Dreamforce on my stand, that's another permission record which will expire over a certain period of time. And so on and so on.
Right. Any one particular individual can have given different types of permissions for different types of things that have different lengths of time.
Correct.
See, now we need to write that down, Ian, so we can talk about it and remember this in 6 months.
Absolutely. And that's the challenge with GDPR, which is that now, as I said, if you don't want to fully comply with GDPR, and not every company has to, at least having a checkbox associated with the different things we send people. So you have a blog, you have a podcast you can subscribe to, you have a blog, you have marketing material, you have product updates. There are 4 different things there. So there are potentially 4 different checkboxes. And those, when that person goes from a lead to a contact, they need to follow it across. So it gets a bit more complicated. It's one of those things which is the just thing. Oh, could you just give me a check? Just put a GDPR checkbox on for me. Well, hang on a minute. How's that really going to work? And then the last bit is, how's the marketing automation system going to work out what the checkboxes on the contact record were? So getting around that marketing cycle, Pardot or Marketing Cloud or MailChimp. So we've spent a long time working out how to get around that cycle to make sure that if someone unsubscribes on a Pardot list, it makes its way back to the contact records to do that unsubscribe. Because otherwise the sales guys are going, well, I've unsubscribed this person, but they're still getting mailings. Oh, that's because marketing's still mailing them off that list. Yeah, but isn't it the same thing? Oh no, Pardot's separate from Salesforce. So again, it's back to best practice. This is nothing to do with GDPR. Just making sure that we're managing those lists correctly is something we need to do. So I can see from your blank faces, you're like, oh, this is really hard. And that's why That's why it's only 4 days to go or 5 days to go, and people are now emailing me, go, could you give me some clues about how I can do this, because I've got to do it this week. Well, you can break the back. I think you can do a lot in a week or so in terms of thinking through what are the marketing lists that you're sending out, then go back through your customer base and go, right, which people have got contracts? Right, they've already got consents because of our contracts. Which people are in the sales cycle with an open opportunity? Great, they've got a consent called legitimate interest. Who've subscribed to our blog? There's another list. So I think there's another of those things which is you look at it and go, this is scary, I don't want to look at it, and it's just too hard. And we had that view probably 6 months ago. I read all the documentation and started looking and going, do you know what? Once you get into it, it's not that hard. You can do it. You can step your way through it. Just don't get the lawyers involved, because they love $500 an hour. They'll happily discuss why clause 17.3 has got some grey areas. The stuff we're talking about is really practical. What does it mean if you're the Salesforce admin or you're the Pardot admin? What have I got to do? What do I have to do slightly differently under this new regime?
And it sounds like, particularly with the package you've built, or at least the same similar kind of functionality, it sounds like from an admin perspective, as you say, it is relatively easy because it's just a matter of building the structure. The trick then is getting the rest of the business, their culture, their processes, and everything else to come into alignment. So how should let's assume that maybe the person who is running the Salesforce instance has a bit more vested interest than just a custom field monkey. How should they actually try to engage the business and get this happening before the worst case scenario rears its ugly head?
Okay, so I would say the first thing is that article I've written gives them like the deep dive into, it starts at what are the principles, what does this mean, and then it gets into what it means for managing data. So that article is not a fun read, it's about 20 minutes, but it gets into some real detail about what do you have to do as an admin. Then once you've got that, then you want to start engaging your senior executives with some simple things, which is, okay, there are 4 major tasks we've got to do if we're going to be GDPR compliant. We've got to get make sure all our contracts are up to date. And I'm sure legal's doing that. Second thing is we need to understand where our data is if for this data deletion thing. So we need to build a data inventory. Third thing is we need to start understanding what our marketing processes look like. So we understand how we can, what do we send people? What are the 4 or 5 different things that we send people? And then work out how we're then going to drive that into tracking permissions. And it's trying to simplify things down rather than going, oh, it's 99 articles and 137 recitals and it's 4% and it's scary. Break it down to simple things, which is these are the things we've got to go and do. And right, that bit about marketing. Let's sit down with the key leaders in marketing and say, let's work out what are the 3 or 4 or the 5 things which people subscribe to. Okay, that's the first question. Second one is, what are the different touch points? How do we touch people, customers, and get those permissions when they sign a contract? So I'd go back chronologically from the very sort of when they've signed a contract and work our way backwards. So when they sign a contract, when they're in the sales cycle, when they get qualified as a lead, when we meet them at a show, when they hit our website as an inbound lead, and you start to list those out, and suddenly you've now got the matrix of, right, when we sign a contract, these are the 3 things we'll subscribe them to. When they hit our website for a blog subscription, that's the 1 thing we're subscribing them to. And again, that document I've talked about describes this matrix. So you get a big blank matrix, and we did it ourselves. There's a whiteboard up in my office here, and we built this matrix, and we started filling out on the whiteboard. And about a week later, we got the team back together and said, let's take another look at that. And we simplified it massively. We went from, I think, I'm just looking at the board now, we had 10 different things we thought we were sending people, and there were 15 different times we touched them, and we simplified that down to 4 things we should send people, and only 8 touch points. And of those 8 touch points, 2 of them are manual, the rest are automated. So use Process Builder workflow. So when an opportunity changed status, create a data permission record. When a new lead gets created, web to lead form. So using something like form assembly, web to lead form, when it creates that lead, it also creates the data permission record. So this doesn't sound quite as scary now. Now we can start populating these records automatically.
It's like what Process Builder was born for, practically.
Absolutely. And you've got the same sorts of things, automation rules inside Pardot. So the way we built this package is that we're using Salesforce tasks as the to-do list. So if a Pardot, someone unsubscribes from a Pardot list, Pardot automation rules creates a Salesforce task. We've got an Apex trigger which looks at those tasks and then uses that as its to-do list and goes, right, there's an unsubscribe here. Right, I'll now go and process that and then go and delete the task.
Why an Apex trigger instead of a process getting the task? Because
that has got to do quite a lot. It's got to read the task, interpret, so the subject and the comment and the task have got some basically some JSON that we push in there. So it's got to interpret that. Then it's got to go through. If it's an unsubscribe, I've got to go through and find every example of why you've subscribed to my blog and go and unsubscribe all of those. And then I've got to go back and delete the task. And I've got to sit there constantly listening to that Salesforce list, the task list.
Okay, Brian's talking. I thought he was taking notes on all this stuff.
No, my 2-year-old has decided not to go to sleep tonight.
He's obviously worried about GDPR and how it's going to affect
He's been up
the
all
American
night,
economy.
And when he falls asleep, he'll randomly wake up screaming something about European email spam. I mean, it is very, very sad.
Welcome to my world.
I'm not sure how he even knows about GDPR unless he's actually listening to the NPR shows when I'm, taking him to daycare.
He is actually in the minority. The Pardot team did a survey of Pardot customers. 396 customers responded to the survey. Okay, 92% said they'd never heard about GDPR, and that was April the 18th. They did that survey.
Wow,
392 is not a whole lot of customers either. Yeah,
but hey, it's still it's people who actually cared enough to respond to the survey and say, "I've never heard about I've no idea what it is."
Huh. I'm a Pardot customer. I didn't get that survey.
Do you have more than 5 Ferraris?
Do Matchbox count?
Matchbox? Hot Wheels?
Hot Wheels?
Hot Wheels, no, probably not. But no, the reason you didn't go on that Pardot list is you're clearly not important enough. And in fact, I'd love to be in your world. I'm on every single Pardot list. I've no idea how I get off.
You ask for your data to be deleted. That's how.
So obviously I'm English, but I've been living in America about 5 years. But I've obviously subscribed to a ton of stuff over time, or I've got on lists in the UK. I must get between 50 and 100 emails a day now with people saying, "Can I just update your consent?" And that's one of the big marketing mistakes that people are making, which is a company the other day sent me an email going, "We can't send you any more emails after the 25th of May unless you say yes." It's like, dude, I've got a contract with you. You're the company I use for doing my foreign exchange transfers from the UK back to the US. I have a contract with you. Yes, you're allowed to contact me because you have a contract with me. So that's the first mistake they made. The second mistake was the email they sent didn't say, "Please, will you resubscribe because we give you valuable foreign exchange insights." It had like 5 paragraphs of legal nonsense about why I had to resubscribe. So the first thing as a marketing team, don't just blindly send out an email to everyone on the database. You only need to do it to those people who you genuinely need consent, number one. And number two, make it something which is compelling, as in the reason we need you to is because we provide you with this information. If you don't want it, fantastic, leave. But again,
we don't want you anyway.
Well, you don't have 5 Ferraris. In that case, we don't want you. I mean, said very politely, but the point about
if you don't want it, you're probably not reading it now anyways.
Correct. So part of this
they can save the 42-cent stamp.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So it's part of this is, I think, being smarter about it rather than the knee-jerk reaction of, "Oh, GDPR, we've just got to do this." Because most people are not going to click that button to say, I reconsent.
So this may be a stupid question, but it's popping to my head right now, and I want to be sure that, one, I've got it, and that anybody else who thinks about this will have it. So you keep saying if somebody has a contract with them, then they don't have to obtain consent. Is it theoretically possible that someone does have a contract and still would wish to have all of their information removed? And if so, what do you do?
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, let's make sure you need to make sure the contract you've got with your customers says that you're able to go and communicate with them. But I'm assuming the things you're likely to communicate are going to be product updates. It's going to be so they're the sorts of things, or marketing updates. That's the first thing. So now, the question you asked was about deleting data. So again, everyone's getting excited about, if someone deletes their data, we've got to delete it everywhere. There are lots of reasons. There are 6 reasons why you don't have to delete someone's data. Okay? One is because you need it for legal reasons. So if I've got a contract with you and I'm meant to be providing a service, it's pretty hard to provide that service if I don't have any of your details. Now, if you don't want you want all your data deleted and you don't want to have a contract with me, that's fine as well. But so therefore,
you won't get service.
Yeah, indeed. And it's interesting, there are a couple of companies. Comcast has taken that approach. Comcast has said, we will send you stuff. If you don't want us to send you stuff, don't be a customer. So they've taken I think they've taken the view, which is this is going to be too hard to do any other way, and made it really binary, and Sky TV in the UK has done the same thing. We will, by taking our service, you have consented to, we'll send you whatever we want to send you. So there are other reasons why you don't have to delete data. It may be you're in a dispute, and therefore we need that data. You may need to hold it for legal reasons. So you have to hold it for 7 years. Another reason is you want to hold the data for trend reasons, so you can anonymize it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a simple hit delete and I'll clear everything out. Just because you've hit delete on a contact, you don't necessarily want to blow away all the related records. So again, you need to be a bit smarter about the way you think about what delete means. And again, unless you're a big company in the public eye, you're unlikely to be hit with millions of people saying, "Send me my data." I mean, sort of the slightly malicious side of me is going, hang on, if I were a Greenpeace and I really wanted to wind up one of these big companies, you get everyone on the 26th of May says, send an email to company of choice, the oil company you hate, with a subject matter access request, and they've got 30 days to respond, and they will just get chewed up trying to deal with all those requests. So it's almost the sort of denial of service equivalent for GDPR. But the majority of us...
It's a GDOS.
But the majority of us, we're not going to get that many requests for deletion. We need to have a process to work out what we do with it. We need to understand how we're going to do it. But I don't think it's going to be the volumes of data that people worry about. Now, different part of deletion is, those consents. If I didn't get consent from those people, strictly I shouldn't be holding that data. So part of this package we've built says there's a certain period of time that you can set for communicating with someone, but there's another period of time that says if we haven't had any consent after X period of time, go and delete the record. And you can set that. So we're trying to help clean up databases, but in a controlled way.
Well, if someone says, hey, I want you to forget about me, don't you have to save the data that says that you're supposed to forget about me?
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to encrypt it, or you have to encrypt it, but also make sure you can't use it. So you can prove you've forgotten it, but you can't use that data.
That sounds hard.
No, what you do is you get one of those Russian hackers that does the ransomware and just apply it to your hard drive. It's perfect.
Well, yeah, that's part of the app we've built, which is actually that
ransomware.
Encrypting and saving. No, not that bit. The bit that's about deleting the data but saving it. So yeah, and there are some other companies out there like Odeceiver that do backup archival, and they've built some functionality which is far broader in terms of being able to delete data and make sure it gets archived in the way that you can't access it, but you can show that you've deleted it. And again, we're getting right down into the minutiae about. And I think lots of companies won't need to worry about that.
But they think they do. And people like admins and BAs, they think they have to.
Yeah, and they're focused on that rather than focused on the things which will make the most difference, which is about engaging customers correctly, making sure that the marketing processes are set, making sure that sales aren't contacting people that marketing have unsubscribed. That's where that's the competitive advantage. And I think the discussion we've just had about, we can't delete data, and then if we delete it, then how on earth are we going to prove it's deleted? And then the lawyers join in and start having discussions, and suddenly the admin's head spinning, going, this is just too hard. Maybe if I hide for another 3 weeks, maybe it'll all blow over. And that's not the point of GDPR. The point of GDPR is being more transparent with customer data. So you can now see why I know a lot about GDPR, but I'm no fun at parties, because people get me started. And I'm that guy in the corner which is like, don't get Ian started. Don't mention it to him.
From one to another, it might also be because you're a bassist. That is a thing I've noticed that for me personally.
Wait, is that a person who's racist against bass?
Wow. That went to a completely different place very quickly.
Yeah, so
you're not denying it either.
No. But he's a fretless bass, which is just raises him to an even further level of obscurity.
Oh, I'm completely socially awkward. I have no ability to talk to people whatsoever. It's why I do a podcast.
See what I thought you said here, Ian? I thought you said he was a threatless bass, and I'm like, aren't all basses threatless?
Yeah, that's right. We stand at the back and watch the drummer's foot. That's what you do. Oh, and load the van. That's the other. Load the van. That's the other thing we have to do.
How do we want to wrap this conversation up?
There's nowhere to go from here but down. So I think we just wrap it.
Well, we start talking about bass players, aren't we? Already at the bottom.
So it's established.
It's the
Ian
bass.
And I both play bass. We've commiserated over many a drink.
The bass is the
Salesforce
foundation,
events.
therefore it's the bottom.
Sure. All right. Yeah.
All right. Just keep digging.
I can't. We're at the bottom.
All right. Yeah.
Thanks, Ian, for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me along. It's been great fun chatting to you guys.
If you missed our announcement that we made the last episode and the episode before that, Brian and I are going to be presenting at Midwest Dreamin'. And we're presenting our infamous session, Know the Flow Code.
Come for the outfits, stay for the knowledge.
Or just the insanity. Because we're going to share secrets, tips, and best practices hidden in the sacred book of ye old Flow Code. Come and join the Flownatics and take the Flownatics pledge.
Ye old Flow Code?
Sorry, ye oldie.
Okay, better. We're also planning on doing a live podcast recording and may have some fun giveaways.
Could it be these cute little stickers of Astro wearing a wizard hat?
And maybe something else.
And also, we are currently recording for Dungeons & Dreamforce Spring Edition. We are doing a Salesforce-themed Dungeons & Dragons game with John Graff and myself, as well as other members of the community. And we are doing it as a fundraiser for Pep Up Tech. So if you could, please go to the link bit.ly/DNDF Spring 18. Those are the letters D as in David, N as in Nancy, D as in David, F as in Frank, Spring 18. And that'll take you to the link for the page where there's also a big old button that says Help Up, and that's what you click to donate. And the way it works is if you donate at least $10, that will be able to help the players. You can actually say, I would like my donation to benefit this person or that person. Or you can say to help the DM. You can donate things like rerolls, magic items, or just helping the DM come up with ways of messing with the players. So please do that. It's for a good cause. Pep Up Tech really could not be a greater charity to donate to.
Episodes are going to be in podcast-only format, airing over at the CloudForce Collective. And the first episode's already out. I believe the additional episodes, there's planning on be 3 to 4 between the end of May and beginning of June.
Yeah, through June, yes.
Wizardcast is produced by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, directed by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, technical administration by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, script writing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, audio editing by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, website maintenance by Brian Kwong and Mark Ross, foundation laying by Mark Ross, and our intern this episode was Kel Henderson. Oh, cool! Our first Australian intern.
G'day, you can be an intern too. Just follow us. Okay, I'm going to stop now. At Wizardcast_pod on Twitter.
You think that's a podcast? Now this is a podcast. Or just come up to us during events. I know, I don't have an Australian
Yours sounds like
accent.
Sean Connery. What the hell?
I like my podcast shaken, not stirred. Or just come up to us during events like Midwest Streaming and tweet about us so we remember to add you to our list.
Send us your interview suggestions, jokes, videos, tips, and feedback, but please, not your bad Sean Connery impersonations, to Wizardcast at thewizardnews.com, or head over to thewizardnews.com and click Contact Wizardcast.
Also, there might be a chance we might have Parker Harris come on. And as you've just heard, we don't do really well with writing our own questions. So if you have something that you want to ask Parker Harris, let us know.
Submit a question by going to bit.ly/ParkerQuestions to fill out our short form and ask your question.
And there are tons of ideas that people have for improving Salesforce. Have you submitted one? Is there one that you voted out that you think is just kind of languishing? You want more people to know about us? Tell us what those ideas are.
Again, go to bit.ly/idea highlight to submit an idea to us, and we will feature it on a future episode.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Wizardcast and receive our next episode automatically.
And please post reviews on Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, and share this episode. It helps others to hear what you just had to endure.
Once again, I'm Brian.
And I'm... Nope. I'm still completely freaking about GDPR. Freaking out, man.
Thanks for listening.
So I can go and get one if you...
I don't think you need it. I use it
Okay.
because I spray pretty heavily, and it's more to protect the microphone from getting too wet and shorting out during sessions.
It's probably too much information.
I hope
Okay.
you're recording that. Cause
Oh yeah,
I'm
that's
putting
totally
that in the
that's
outtakes.
totally recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.